Hi.
Hi. Okay, so I think everyone's audio is working fine. If anyone can tell us if you can't hear us, that would be excellent. You can just put it in the chat because you can't technically talk. Thank you. Nice. Okay, so I guess we can just get started. I know there's still a couple people that are, gonna come in the middle. But just to, respect everyone's time, and since everyone's, already here, we will get started. So, hi everyone. Thank you for coming. Today we're going to be talking about effective study methods. Specifically, how are we going to be able to maximize our study efficiency? This also relates a lot to, feelings like feeling burnt out and stuff like that as well. And yep. So just to introduce ourselves really quick, we are co-hosting. I'm Magda. I am a rising junior at the University of Michigan in the LSA Honors College studying neuroscience, and I'm the founder and executive director of General Intelligences.
Well,
Oops. Okay, so I think that Divya's cutting out, but I guess for right now, until she reconnects. So General Intelligences is a nonprofit. We're an international nonprofit, and basically our goals include providing resources for high school and college students that identify as first gen and low income. So our team is made up of college students from across the US, and we have some members in the UK and Canada as well. Basically, our organization believes in teaching things called soft skills, if you guys are familiar with that. Stuff like financial literacy, how to interview, yeah, just basic skills that don't get really taught in school, but are really important anyway. So we do this by partnering with other organizations and schools. And what we do is we bring free webinars and workshops to students. Um, sorry, I seem to have something in my throat. Our belief is that for education to be equitable, everyone needs to have access to things like learning languages or how to, have a well-written resume and stuff like that. So what we do is we have a tutoring and mentorship program. We also do track volunteer hours. So if you are interested in joining, that's always an option as well. I'm going to see if Divya has reconnected. Yes, she has. So I will let her hopefully introduce. Hi, Divya.
hi, I'm so sorry, guys. It looks like I was kicked out of the meeting. It might have been my Wi-Fi. I apologize for that. But I think it got cut off right whenever I started introducing myself, if I'm correct. I'm not sure how much you guys heard.
Yes.
Okay, so hi again. My name is Divya. I'm also a rising junior at the George Washington University, where I'm majoring in neuroscience and minoring in public health. Additionally, I'm also a co-founder and the current CEO of Global Guru, which is the organization that is co-hosting this lovely webinar with General Intelligences.
Okay, so I just went ahead and introduced General Intelligences. If you wanted to go ahead and introduce yours.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
So Global Guru is a nonprofit organization as well. And so our mission is that we seek to supplement students' education with free, interactive, live online classes. And we hope that this will help students succeed and advance their learning at a personal level. So our curriculum encompasses many areas of study. We currently have 11 different subjects that we offer, ranging from STEM subjects, computer science, art, and chess. And then we also include some humanities subjects as well. And our curriculum, like our tutoring, is completely free of cost. And our instructor base actually consists of students as well as retired teachers that work as volunteers for our organization. And we hope to make personalized education available for everyone while developing a self-motivated network of tutors and learners. And our long-term goal is that we want to increase global accessibility of tutoring by recruiting students and teachers from all across the United States and preferably the rest of the world as well.
So this is just, I guess, to reiterate a little bit, if you were interested in getting involved with, either of our organizations, probably the best way would be to email either of us at our respective emails. You can also find, more information on our websites, as you would expect. What we are looking for my organization right now are content writers, so basically just writing articles. We also have tutoring and marketing and social media. Specifically, we're looking for search engine optimization people. So if you have any background or skills in that, we're looking for that right now. And then, yeah, so.
Yeah, so in regards to Global Guru, as you might see, like there's a bunch of different like positions that are highlighted, but I just want to I guess differentiate between the different things that we're offering. So if you'd like to sign up as a student, it's pretty easy. You just go straight to our website and we have a registration page for that. And similarly, we have a registration page to volunteer as a tutor as well. And so volunteering as a tutor, it's a pretty low time commitment because our sessions are normally 1 to 2 sessions per week. And it's also just 30 minutes to 1 hour a week. But if you're looking to get more leadership experience or, you want to become more involved with our organization, which we hope you do, you can either volunteer as a curriculum developer or enter and apply for one of our managerial positions. So for the curriculum developer, what essentially this position does, it kind of they basically create all of the content for our tutoring sessions, because again, everything that we do is very personalized and we want to ensure that each student is getting the necessary material that they need to succeed at a personal level. So again, we would kind of just assign you to a subject and you'd be a curriculum developer, or if you apply to be a manager, you'd either help us manage the volunteers, you'd kind of look over the classes, and you'd kind of help us manage the website. So if you're interested in any of the managing or developing positions, please send us an email at globalguru19@gmail.com. But if you'd like to register just as a tutor or student, you can just do that at our website, which is highlighted in blue as well.
Cool. So just to give you guys an idea of kind of the structure of what we're talking about today, we're going to start off by talking about study habits. So we're going to talk about some, effective strategies for that. Then we're going to go into differentiating between active and passive learning. Basically, what makes one type of learning better than the other in terms of retention. Then we will be talking about types of learners. So this one is very important. There's actually a couple of different ways you can determine this online for free. And once you do determine this, you can curate your studying towards that. And then after that, we will be talking about some productivity and study tool apps and websites. Most of them are free, I believe. I think a couple of them have like a nominal charge, or, you can pay for upgrades and stuff like that, but keeping it affordable because we're all students. And then we will have a Q&A at the end. I see right now that we actually already have some questions that came in. So great, just make sure that you put them in the Q&A section as they come about while we're talking, presenting and stuff like that, because we are not able to, or at least I'm not able to see the chat while I am screen sharing. So yeah, to just kick this off with the study habits, obviously some of these might seem intuitive, but I think it still goes without saying that you need to emphasize them. Organization is a really big one. You need to decide on a method that works best for you. But besides that, the atmosphere that you study in is also really an important part of how much you retain while studying. So for example, in pre-COVID times, I know a lot of people like to go to, a coffee shop or something like that. And while that might be good for getting certain types of work done, it's not the best environment for other more specific type of higher level thinking, because it's not a very quiet environment and there's a lot of distractions there. So unless you are a very, motivated and skilled learner, it'll be really easy to fall prey to those different distractions. You also want to schedule your study time. You can use like a Google Calendar or something else like that. And you need to be realistic with yourself. So I know a lot of times, especially like in the weeks leading up to final exams or stuff like that, you're like, I have to study this much material before my exam, and I am going to dedicate 8 hours every single day leading up to the exam. But unfortunately, for a lot of students, that's really not that feasible. And that's what leads to burnout for a lot of students as well, because they are not recognizing their limitations and how much they are retaining after studying for that long. And then in terms of the next important study habit, there's efficiency. So the best study method that we will cover, or that anyone will tell you from the internet, is one where you can maximize your efficiency when you're studying. So this is going to tie in more deeply towards when we talk about what type of learner you are, because this is really more personalized. There's no one size fits all method. That's why some people might consider, reading out of a textbook to be their preferred way of studying, while other people would hate to just sit and read a textbook and get their information like that. And then the last part for this slide, at least, is inquiry. So a lot of people, especially freshmen, in high school or in college, are scared to ask questions. And that should not be the case, because you should really be advocating for yourself and for your learning. So if something is unclear, whether that's like an aspect of the syllabus or the content itself, then you really need to address that earlier than later, because a lot of times that will kind of accumulate, and then it'll, get worse come exam time. And then a second part of inquiry that a lot of people don't consider, besides just, asking a question to other people, is asking yourself the questions as well. So kind of some introspection is important too. So what you need to do is reflect. Do I really understand this material? Do I really understand what's happening here, or this concept? Or am I convincing myself that I understand what's happening here? So that's kind of a key distinction to be making. And then the next two, so we have 5 effective study habits, a good way to remember. Lack of distractions. So relating to, the coffee shop example, you want to limit your distractions as much as possible. So if that means going to like a quiet floor of like your college's library or something of that nature, then do that, utilize that when you need to. A lot of people like to social study, if that makes any sense. It's not really like a term, but I'm just going to put that there, meaning that they like to study with their friends or their peers, which is a great way, obviously, to learn the material. But sometimes you're going to have to, study on your own, because it might be more distracting than it is helping. Relating to that as well, I know a lot of people struggle with checking their phone. You watch one TikTok and all of a sudden it's like been 20 minutes and you've watched 30 TikToks and your life is spiraling slowly out of control. So what you need to do is put your phone away. Just either charge it, put it in a different room, whatever, works best. And then once you've done a certain amount of focused work, then you can go ahead and reward yourself with some screen time. So that's also incentivizing yourself, which is a very important, part of not burning out. It also is a great way to implement breaks. So like, let's, for example, say that you're studying for an hour. I know a lot of different techniques emphasize 30 minutes, but if you are really focused in something, at least what I've found personally is that I think an hour is like a better sort of time to take a break. So yeah. And then you want to practice the content, obviously. That means, taking any sort of practice exams, quizzes, stuff like that. Often you might think that you're doing really well with terminology, but a lot of exams and stuff like that will emphasize higher level questions. So you guys might have seen this meme. It was going around like a while back, but it was basically like the homework is like this very, you know, baseline level of understanding. Then maybe like a quiz is like, oh, what's happening here? Not quite sure. And then the exam is like, this is all Greek to me. And that doesn't just like happen overnight. Like the professor doesn't just wake up and go, I'm going to give you complex material. It's because exams are going to highlight those higher level question processes. So you need to identify if you can do this effectively, ideally before your exam and not during your exam. So yeah, we're just gonna briefly touch on active versus passive learning. So I'm sure probably you guys have already kind of heard of this, but just to reiterate, passive learning is basically when someone is, you know, lecturing you in a class, or you know, you're listening to your professor or teacher or something like that. It is teacher centered. Um, and that's not a bad thing. It helps you to get an introduction to the material, and it's obviously the preferred way that schools operate. Um, and oftentimes it's in a larger class setting, so that could be anywhere from, you know, like 30 people to like 300 people. It depends, obviously, what kind of a school you go to, but um, active is, on the other hand, more relating to doing something beyond just watching and listening. It's more related to doing. So that would be anything that involves you doing things and thinking, you know, again, the higher level sort of thinking and cognition. So that could be making outlines and study guides, you know, whatever works best for you. And then, you know, searching for significance in terms of the content. And then you might be wondering, how do I learn more actively? So you can do things like spaced repetition. So if any of you are pre-med or going to plan on being pre-med, I suppose, spaced repetition is basically the entire methodology behind this software called Anki. And that's used by like med students and I guess also pre-meds that are studying for the MCAT. And basically the theory behind it is that people forget a big chunk of information as early as the next day after they've studied something. So you want to engage with the material ideally daily until you get it to that point where you have, you know, committed it to memory. Then you also want to teach. So a lot of schools would emphasize you teaching the content to another student or giving a presentation or being a TA as really, I guess, emphasizing the content that you know and committing it to a higher degree of mastery. And then beyond that, you want to learn to identify patterns. So that can take a large amount of content and help you to condense it, which is very helpful for someone that doesn't want to be studying like 12 hours every single day. So if Divya, you want to explain the...
Yes, I can go ahead and explain the LPR methodology. So before I do that, I actually just wanted to give a short personal anecdote about why spaced repetition actually works, because I think it's a really great study strategy, especially because I can just like get into the anecdote, but I was taking a chemistry class because, again, I'm a neuroscience major, and organic chemistry is something that requires intense practice and review. It's like a lot of people, like, you know, whenever they first start out of the course, they'll be like, okay, you can kind of cram all the material, you know, I'll study, you know, for 8 hours, like the day before the test, and I'll be fine. But the problem is that it's so much material that even if you watch all the videos, study all the textbooks, you know, you do everything, it's just impossible to kind of synthesize and understand that information within such a short period of time. Because the problem is that for things like chemistry and other high level topics, it's very hard to apply those concepts if you haven't internalized them. So that's why spaced repetition is really important, because, you know, you have to do these problems, you have to, you know, read the material, you have to watch videos, whatever works for you. it won't work in the span of like 3 hours. Like it takes daily, practicing in order to see results. And so I would just, like to highlight that and make sure that you guys, like, if you don't take anything else away from this presentation, just know that daily practice will always be much more beneficial than trying to cram for an exam or any other type of assessment. But I digressed a little bit, but I will go now into the LPR methodology. So this is something that my organization, Global Guru, actually uses a lot whenever we tutor students, but I've found that it's actually a very great resource for any student to use, even if you're not receiving tutoring. So LPR stands for Learn, Practice, and Review. And so learn is the first stage of kind of like, whenever you're trying to, I guess, study a subject. So this is the phase where you're going to acquire the knowledge about the subject, and you're going to do this in a way that works best for you. So this might be, we're going to get into the different types of learners like in the following slides, but based upon the learning style that works best for you, that might include, listening to a lecture, reading a textbook, making notes, maybe you watch a video. It's just really what works for you in order to understand and gain the information. So the second phase of learning a subject is practice. So once you have all the information, that's great. But if you don't know how to actively apply it to a problem, then it's going to be really difficult to do well on exams, because oftentimes professors will test you on how you apply something and not just the baseline, like what is this concept. So in order to practice something effectively, it's important that you use active learning strategies. So this would include doing practice problems, quizzing yourself, teaching it to someone, doing, more problems, and just actively engaging with it and not passively just reading the material or just, looking at notes. Like you're going to actually have to apply what you learn in order to actively see and understand the material. And then so after you've practiced and learned the material, you're 2 steps ahead. That's great. But then say, you study for 1 week and then you learn and you practice and then you don't review it. 2 weeks later, an exam comes, and then what are you going to do? So that's why reviewing is very important, because if you space out your learning and you practice daily, you'll be able to actually engage with the material in, on a day-to-day basis, and that'll help you retain everything much better, because the more you practice with something, the more it's actually, going to stay in your long-term memory. And that way you'll be able to recall these concepts and use them much more easier than just cramming and trying to put everything on an exam and then forgetting it later. And like for anyone who's pre-med, for example, the MCAT is all about the review stage, because you can learn and practice something all you'd like, but if you can't recall all of that information on the day of your exam, then it's going to be a really big problem, right? So that's why reviewing is very important, because you need to make sure that you're able to recall that information at any time.
Okay, I just realized I was muted. Whoops. So basically, to kind of reiterate and also to tie in back to the Orgo anecdote, this is also relating to Orgo. That class just has that effect, I suppose. But my Orgo professor also, I guess, summarized this in a really good way that I want to share with all of you. Basically, what she said was that studying for this class would be a marathon and not a sprint. So I think that's a really good way to kind of compare what we've been talking about with spaced repetition. Basically, that means you're not going to want to sprint through it and cram the last second. You would rather, study in chunks and get to the finish line by sustaining your energy throughout. And then kind of just briefly, you want to start with obviously your lecture notes. That's the best place to start. A lot of teachers will draw content for exams and stuff like that from lecture notes, obviously. Then you would want to determine any sort of questions you have from lecture. Ideally, right after lecture, just give it a look, say, I don't quite remember what was happening at this particular slide. And just make a note of that to yourself, and then go to office hours or after school tutoring. And then after that, you want to set a timeline. So obviously in college, you get a syllabus, and then from that, you can base around when you're studying and what you're studying at that given time. And that will help you to structure your studying and also figure out when to go to office hours and ask for help. Just a heads up, if you do go to office hours just before an exam, you might not get your question answered because a lot of people are very last minute with their studying. So just keep that in mind. It'll just be easier if you ask questions as they come up rather than holding all of them until the end of the semester. And then for practice questions, obviously that's just a really great way to implement your learning. It'll help you to review any sort of mistakes that you have, and also understand how to not make them again on an exam or something. And then you want to also make connections. So a really useful exercise I learned I actually took a class on study methods at my college. It was a really cool class. I don't know if every school like offers it, but if they do, I would recommend like signing up for it. It was just for credit, no credit. It wasn't for a grade or anything, but it's very helpful to, learn how to study. And basically what they said in that class was that you need to make connections because you can remember material better by connecting it to something else. So whether that's like a mnemonic or something like that for like, I don't know, a chemistry term like oil rig. I think everyone knows that one. If you don't, I'm sorry. But you want to obviously just make those connections to other things that are relevant examples to you personally. And then the last thing is you want to mimic your test conditions. So people obviously say this all of the time for MCAT studying, but I think it really applies for SAT, ACT, and honestly any sort of exam that requires, a lot of practice and that kind of stuff. You want to mimic your test conditions. It'll help you with time management, and it's also the best way to practice. A lot of times you might find that, oh, I do know the answer to this, or I can get to the answer to this, but it's going to take me, I don't know, 2 hours or something like that. And you have limited time on the exam, so that's not useful. But it is useful to know so that you can figure out how to streamline that process. So yeah, so we've been hyping up talking about types of learners for most of this presentation. So now we are going to be finally talking about the types of learners. So we made this little infographic chart sort of thing. There are a lot of subdivisions beyond this, but these would be the basic subdivisions of types of learners. So there is visual. So those are people that prefer to see material formatted in a clear way. So they might prefer to see like really pretty note sets, like the ones that people make on their iPads and stuff like that, because it's visually appealing and interactive. Auditory would prefer to listen to material. So that would be like either a lecture format or like maybe like a YouTube video or like a Khan Academy video or something like that. And then intrapersonal would be that they prefer to learn in a small group, bouncing ideas off of one another. That one can get a little bit tricky because sometimes, studying with people becomes more social than academic. So that one really needs probably the most balance and I guess restraint as well. And then there's kinesthetic. So at least for a lot of my friends that are in engineering, they really align themselves with kinesthetic learning. So that's learning by doing. So that would be either, like setting up, I don't know what they do exactly, setting up circuitry for like a robot arm or something like that, rather than reading about it in a textbook, just as an anecdote. And then some skills for the different learners would include, for visual, you would watch your videos, use diagrams, make them, color code your notes, handwrite information, use blank copy paper to visualize concepts. So all of that obviously is tying into you're seeing something that's aesthetically appealing, but it is also sort of helping, again, to reiterate, you're synthesizing the information, which is a really important part of the active learning that we've been talking about. Then there's auditory. So like I said, you could listen to recordings, or you could have someone explain something to you at office hours, which are a great place to go to ask for help. Then intrapersonal could be a study group. A lot of schools have like structured study groups that you can sign up for. If your school doesn't, then it's totally fine to go ahead and make an informal sort of study group that usually meets like one or a couple times a week. And what you would do is you would go over, homework or tricky concepts and stuff like that. And then kinesthetic, it would really help to have a 3D representation in hand. So kind of going back, I guess, again to organic chemistry, a lot of people suggest that if you are more of a kinesthetic learner, to get a model kit is what they call it. And basically that'll just help you to visualize the 3D structure of chemical molecules and compounds. And that just, really helps a lot if you're a kinesthetic learner.
Could I add something quickly before we
Yes,
move?
for sure.
Yeah,
Whoops. Go ahead.
totally good. So I also wanted to point out, like, we have like categorized the different types of learners into 4 categories, but it's also important to note that you can be a combination of these learning types, right? Because I'll just use myself as an example. I found that, like, for me, for lectures, for example, that are pre-recorded, I actually learn best whenever I'm watching the lecture and then also writing notes at the same time so like in the instance of organic chemistry again, the organic chemistry lecture will be, going on, and then I'll be actually referencing the textbook and writing my notes at the same time to kind of just cross-reference everything. So that way I'm not just listening to the lecture, but I'm also seeing the textbook in front of me and seeing my notes and actively engaging with everything. So that actually helps me synthesize things much better than if I were to just listen to it. Because if I just listen to the lecture, then sometimes, like, I zone out, like I want to go on my phone, TikTok and Instagram are pretty appealing, and I just get very distracted. So, it's important to recognize that you could, be a combination of these learning types, and it's totally fine. And it's just, you need to experiment and find what works best for you, because what works for you might not work for someone else and vice versa. So just something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess also to kind of bounce off of that really quick before we go into the next part, if you are not sure of what works best for you, besides just obviously like trying it and seeing what works, there's also a couple of different online quizzes and stuff that you can take, and that might also help you determine what kind of a learner you are, or slash multiple types. Um, Okay, so basically, before we get started on websites and apps, obviously, this is not a comprehensive list in any sort of way. If you go to the App Store, there are just hundreds of different options. But I think that we are just going to highlight a couple of, really good ones that we've heard about or experienced ourselves. And I think the best thing, again, like Divya was saying, is you need to go and personally try them and see what's most effective for your learning style. So if Divya, you want to talk a little bit about.
Yeah, for sure. So again, Global Guru, we provide free tutoring and in a lot of subjects, and this is very helpful if you need more active engagement, or if you're more of a visual or auditory learner, because again, if you need someone to kind of teach the material to you, or if you want to kind of engage with things on whiteboards, as we do all of our tutoring through Zoom, it's a great way to kind of get a deeper understanding of subjects that you might have problems with. And we are here as a resource if you need or want to give help to students who want to learn.
Yeah, and then so for our website, we used to do one-on-one, but now instead we've decided to opt more towards resource guides. So basically what we do is we have people create resource guides for different high school, college subjects and stuff like that. And then they have the option to record a video that we will later put up on our website for the more challenging concepts. So obviously that would help and be best for people that like to listen to things and also people that like to see things, because we are just going to make the resource guide very, visually appealing and kind of a cursory glance at the material. So yeah. I think, so we sent out a survey beforehand, which is why you guys obviously got the Zoom link. And a lot of you mentioned using Google Calendar, which is excellent. I also use Google Calendar, and I think it's a great way to keep track of things. Besides that, I think a lot of people have also mentioned using Flora, and I think it's Habitica, but I could be incorrect. And basically for Flora, I don't know if anyone's heard of the Pomodoro Technique. Anyone? I mean, oh shoot, I forgot you guys can't speak up. But yeah, Divya, if you wanted to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the Pomodoro technique, it's worked pretty well for me. What it is essentially it's kind of break studying. So the whole concept is that you study for 25 minutes on and then you give, yourself a 5-minute break. And then you can do that for as many cycles as you want until you finish your work. Typically, I've heard that like the most like productive set of cycles is like if you do 25 on, 5 off like 4 times, and then you take like a longer break and then repeat like as you need it. So it's just kind of like Magda was saying, it kind of helps with decreasing burnout because 25 minutes is not a lot of time in comparison to like studying for 3 hours. And so you're much more likely to actually, work if you have something to look forward to. So for example, say, you work for 25 minutes and then on your 5-minute break, you can watch a TikTok or, talk to a friend or do whatever, you enjoy like in that 5-minute break. And so Flora actually does this. I use the Flora app. I think it's absolutely great. What it does is that whenever you start your 25-minute study time, it starts growing a tree on your phone screen. So it's like you can't like unlock or lock the screen because if if you unlock or like get on your phone, basically the tree will die. And it actually has an option where like you can choose like if you open your phone and like you make the tree die, it'll donate like a certain amount of money from your bank account to forest conservation. So if you want to be very motivated, you can actually deposit that money, and then if you get on your phone, then it'll be taken away from your account. And I mean, for like conservation is a very good cause, so I don't think it's a lose situation, but it's a very great way to help you stay motivated and on track if you're trying to study for an upcoming test or anything like that.
Yeah, and then so for Habitica, I briefly had it on my phone. I actually just recently deleted it only because I'm constantly running out of space. But basically, it's a very good interface for helping you to commit to a to-do list, basically. So what you would do is on the app, you can kind of input habits or something that you want to get done. So like, let's say, I don't know, eat 5 pieces of fruit or something like that. And then you can check it off every time you've done it, every day until it becomes a habit, and it's very cool. I could try to show you guys the interface. I don't think it's going to translate very well onto the screen, so I will just kind of describe it instead. Basically, when you get on there, you have a little character icon on the top, and then you have a bar for health and experience and stuff like that, and you can level up basically by doing tasks inside of the app. So it's just a really cool way to kind of incentivize yourself to get your goals accomplished. Ah, yes. So as you can see, these are people that do not exist. But we do want you to fill out the post survey. Obviously, don't leave yet because we do have a question and answer session. But once you exit out of it, I have set it up in such a way that you should be routed to a follow-up survey link for you to give us some feedback on how we did, what you liked, and also to give us some insights into what kind of things you want to see us talk about in the future. So yeah, it'll be very brief, just on Google Forms, and we would really appreciate if you fill it out. So time for the Q&A. I'm just gonna stop sharing really quick so I can actually go and see the questions. Okie doke. So first question, someone said, will the recording be sent out? Sent out, I suppose, yes. It'll be posted on both of our websites. It won't be sent out in an email though, because that gets a little complicated. So to answer your question in short, yes. Then the next question was, and I think obviously we both are going to be able to answer this one, is how do you stay motivated during studying? So I guess for me, um, I would say definitely chunking. So that relates to kind of just studying in like shorter spans of time, and then rewarding yourself with like, I don't know, a snack, a break, anything like that. That really helps to, avoid burnout for me.
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh, no problem.
It didn't work. But that's a really great point. Like, I also agree. Like, I also study in chunks. I think that's a very great way to avoid getting burnt out. And then also, what I found is that if you have a lot to do, I find it very easy to kind of just start off with doing something basic. Like, say it's like I have to send an email or something that's like not even related to studying. I'll do that, and that'll just kind of like once you complete that task, you'll get a sense of like, oh, like I did something. So I find that it's much more motivating for me to like tackle things such as like going through an entire chapter of like chemistry or biology or whatever I'm studying. So like say it may not be an email in your case, but say if you have like a really short assignment and then a very long assignment, I'd say, do the short assignment first. You'll finish it and you'll get a sense of accomplishment. And then it'll be like, okay, I did this. I can go do that. So, I mean, some people might work in different ways as well. Like you might want to finish the longer one and then go to the shorter one. But just for me personally, I found like I just get very burnt out if I start with something long because I'm just like, this is just too much and I cannot deal with it. So just again, it helps with breaking things up and like, rewarding yourself and making sure that you always know that you're working because you have a goal in mind, right? Because if you also put your goal like, oh, like I'm studying because I want to be a doctor, an engineer, or I want to go into XYZ field, like having that in the back of your mind as well is also a really great way to stay motivated.
Okay, so looks like the next question is specifically about the Pomodoro technique. And they ask, does it really work? So I think Divya would be best to answer this because you use it.
Yeah, so I would say that like it has worked for me. And also I guess I want to preface by also saying that you can adapt the Pomodoro technique as well. So like say you don't want to do the 25 5-minute split, you can easily make it 50 and 10-minute splits. Or, if you really don't want to study, you can make it like 15 and 3-minute splits. Like it's really just up to you. But I found that because I'm someone who can focus for like a pretty intense amount of time pretty intensely for a short amount of time, and then my focus kind of just frazzles away. It's like this kind of just capitalizes on that because I'm able to get as much work as I need to get done in a short period of time. And I would say that you don't even need to keep it for studying. Like say if like Magda and I are both like, we've co-founded a nonprofit. So there's like a lot that goes with that. So even if you have tasks that are not related to studying, it just kind of helps you get them done for me personally, because you have like a set time frame and it just kind of gives you a deadline to get it done, because otherwise I'm more likely to not study at all if I don't have something like a timer or like the Flora app or something like motivating me, because I just will not have any motivation, clear cut. So it motivates me, it keeps me on track, and I would definitely recommend it.
Awesome. So looks like the next question is, how do you take effective notes? I think there are a couple different ways that you could go about this. If you wanted to look up different methods and kind of compare them for yourself, that would be probably the best place to start. So, for example, some people like to structure it in such a way. I don't think this one has a name specifically, but I will just talk about it in terms of describing. Some people, based on the subject, it also varies as well, but let's just assume for a second that this is all just for one subject. Um, you would start off by defining any of the tricky terms, then you would structure it sort of in a sense that would follow your syllabus. So a lot of times, you have the syllabus and that's a really great reference. And then subsections of the syllabus are also given to you by your professor or your teacher or stuff like that. And then you will want to make notes around those like foundational concepts as they're called for MCAT. But for other things, it would just be like a really short outline of the main points, I suppose, for those different things. Off the top of my head, the only one that I'm thinking of right now for some reason is the Cornell method of notes. There are certainly a lot more that are out there. I don't exactly know why that's the only one that's coming to mind, but basically, yeah, that's my advice for that.
I completely agree with everything that she said. I would also just like to emphasize that again, whenever you take notes, it's more of like I would not be someone like I would not recommend writing down the entire textbook just because I think notes should be kind of like a cheat sheet of what you should refer to, because if you just spend time copying like every single thing of the textbook or a lecture slide, like that's basically passive learning, right? Because it's just going to be a bunch of information that you're writing down, and the chances are that like you actually synthesize and understand it, it's pretty low. So again, it's just very good if you read the information and then summarize it, because if you summarize it, you're actively thinking about it. It'll help you kind of, you know, condense it in a way that you'll remember it later. So yeah.
Okay, so the next one is very simple to answer. They just asked if the slides would also be sent out. Yes, the slides will also be sent out. Also, thank you for the compliment. I appreciate people appreciating the way that this looks. Okay, next one is, how do you make studying fun? I found that I find it extremely boring to just study, and my friends are often busy. So I think that's a very good question. I think that differs a lot based on what your personal motivations are. For example, at least for me, what really helps me get through studying for something that I find difficult or not interesting is sort of imagining the end goal. So for example, I'm not the biggest fan of chemistry. I know I've mentioned this throughout the presentation, but I'm not the biggest fan of chemistry. But I make myself study for it by kind of reiterating that I don't have to, I guess, do this in the future again and put myself through it again if I do well the first time. So that's a very good way to incentivize yourself, I would guess. And then besides that, if you can gamify studying, that's also a very good way to go about it. There's probably some apps out there that are very good for that exact purpose, but if not, you could just, I don't know, make some sort of flashcard based thing, I think.
So yeah, if I were to answer that, I honestly just try to like make studying an experience. I know that sounds so weird, but like I'll literally like prepare myself like for a study session. Like I'll get like the comfy blanket, you know, I'll get I love chocolate almonds, so like I'll just get like a small bowl of those. And then I have like I've made like a study playlist. So whenever I go to study something that I don't like, or just even whenever I'm studying in general, I just kind of like have a place that I sit and I have like these things. So I know like, you know, I'm going to listen to this music. I'm going to, you know, eat this snack, and I'm going to do this. So it just kind of puts you in the right vibe. And it's like, I mean, the music I listen to, I like it, and it's like very motivating to me, and like, you know, I enjoy it. So, you know, that's a way it makes studying fun for me, because like I know that I'm in a vibe that, you know, yes, I might be studying something that I absolutely detest, but at least I'm comfortable while I'm doing it. And again, like Magda said, it's very important that you keep the end goal in mind. Like, yes, like chemistry sucks and we both hate it, but if you finish it now, you know, you won't have to do it again. And once you become a doctor, you know, you don't really have to use it in your day-to-day life. So we just got to get through it. You need to do it well, use your active learning strategies, and you won't have to deal with it later.
Okay, so next one is, do you also use Google Calendar and Keep? What are some good task management platforms, especially free ones? Um, I have not actually heard of Keep. I've used Google Calendar really extensively. I think I've already talked about this, so I'm not going to reiterate. In terms of other task management platforms, this is not per se a platform, but I like to make to-do lists on OneNote. I think that's just a personal thing. For like each subject or like class, I have like a different notebook for those different classes, and then I will go ahead and make a to-do list based on like sort of like my week schedule. Um, like I need to get this much reading done, like this chapter or something, this much notes written out, or take this many practice exams or anything like that. So that's what I use. Okay, and then what are other apps and websites that you recommend? Um, okay, definitely OneNote. Or I think there are a couple of other ones, but OneNote is free, so obviously that's like preferred. OneNote also syncs across a bunch of devices, so does Google Drive. I think both of them are very good if you want to have a place to put your notes. And I mean, obviously, worst case, maybe you're having a late night study session and I don't know, your cat bumps into you while you're drinking coffee, and then oops, there goes your laptop. But both of them are basically like already synced up to everything, so you don't have to worry about um, losing all of your notes, basically. So I think that that's very convenient, and you can also take them anywhere.
On that note, I'd also like to say I don't do this, but I know I have a lot of friends who use iPads. So I think Notability is something that they also recommend as a very good iPad app. And also, if you're like me, I love like writing on just like I don't keep notebooks. I use like I have it right here actually. I have like white copy paper and I just like write all of my notes on there and I kind of use binders and stuff for that. But what's really useful is that if you scan everything and then you put it in a folder, you can like digitalize your notes and you can have them on the go as well. So I think that's also something that you can do. Like, say if you like paper notes but want a digital copy, it's pretty easy. There's so many PDF scanners on the App Store and everything. You can just download one of them and take your notes and have them with you if you can't visit. Because like I know for me, like if you're taking 5 different textbooks, like it's just a lot on the back and you don't really want to be carrying them. So that's another great way to kind of just consolidate everything.
Okay, next question is, do you also discuss the preparation for colleges, resumes, and the process? I'm not exactly sure if that's directed towards like both or one of us. At least for like my organization, yes. So we mostly target high school and college students. So a lot of our organizations focused on colleges, the application, also matriculating, and a huge chunk of our organization is focused on resumes and I guess job seeking skills, just more broadly in general.
In terms of Global Guru, I would say that we're more, again, we're a tutoring and education-based organization. And so while we do offer services that include like essay editing or like things like that that you might use in the college application process, I would say that, in terms of like, I mean, we could offer resume, I guess editing things in the future, but currently we do not. But if you're ever in need of anything education-based or essay related, we're here for you guys.
Okay, and then next question is, how do you improve your long-term memory, like regarding studying and tests? So that's actually a very, very good question. I think a lot of people struggle with that long-term memory. A lot of people, I think most people actually would tell you, oh, I took that exam and now I remember nothing from that class. And I think that's a very universal, almost ubiquitous experience for a lot of students, especially when you have a lot of material and a lot of classes semester to semester. There are just going to be some classes where you don't study well enough to commit it to long-term memory. But I would say, especially the classes that you're very passionate about, you kind of unconsciously commit the things to long-term memory. So if you can kind of mimic that for other classes in terms of what do you do when you're studying for those classes that you're really passionate about, I think that would be my best advice for committing something to long-term memory.
I agree with everything she said. I'd also like to point out, if you want things to stick in your long-term memory, always use active learning, because chances are whenever you learn something passively, it's probably not going to stick for the longest time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then we have one more question. How do you prioritize tasks when you're studying, especially when you have multiple things to do at the same time? So I guess Divya, if you wanted to start us off.
Yeah, so actually I'm going to share my screen with you guys because I use the sticky notes feature on my laptop so much, and I think it's a very great way to do that. Oh, I cannot share my screen.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I think I might have to, um, all panelists. There we go. I think it should work now.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm just going to share 2 different sticky notes, I guess, with you guys. So the first one I have I don't know if you can see my full screen. Can you see my full screen, or can you just share, like, see the OneNote?
I can see, like, I guess the note.
The note. Okay. So would you mind saying which note it was? Because I'm not sure. Because
It's
I'm seeing my full.
the MCAT and class study to do
Yeah.
24
Okay.
hours.
So the first, like, what I do is that I kind of like, because I'm studying for the MCAT, for example, and I have different classes, like there's just a lot of work in general that's going on, right? So say like I have a test coming up in like OChem, for example, like it's just a hypothetical thing. And then I have you know, MCAT studying to do, and then I have, you know, global guru things to do. So like, how do you get all of those done? So the way I prioritize it is if I have a test, I break up the different chapters I need to do, and then I break up the different like questions in each chapter that I have to do, and then I do the same thing for the MCAT, and then I do the same thing for global guru. So you kind of like have your high level deadlines, then you have your, you know, very like day-to-day deadline. So for me, it's very important to have both of those things, just so like I know, like say for organic chemistry, I cover everything that I need to do. So say if I have 6 chapters, I know that I have to cover these 6 chapters, but I also know that I have to cover, you know, these individual chapters each day and do XYZ amount of questions each day in order to meet the daily goal so that I can meet the long-term goal. And once you do that for like each of the things you have to do, it becomes pretty easy. Instead of just looking at like, oh, I have to get through 6 chapters, you can say, okay, I'm going to do a chapter of like, you know, MCAT studying today, another chapter of OChem today, and then like, you know, maybe send 3 emails for global guru out. So it's just kind of like breaking down things. I know we've talked about chunking so much on this call, but it's because if you break things down into smaller components, it makes it a lot easier to manage, at least from my personal experience.
Okay, so that seems like all of the questions for today. So once again, once you exit out of here, please, please, please take that survey. And thank you everyone for coming and listening today. And we hope that this was really helpful.
So likewise, thank you so much for coming. We really enjoyed having you guys here today, and hopefully we can do more similar webinars in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Bye everyone. Have a
Bye,
good,
have a great one.
yes.